So tomorrow I'm doing some trades. Might even talk about what I'm doing for the week, but right now I'd missed the ex dividend date for ADX. You got to buy before the ex dividend date, which is tomorrow, in order to get the dividend for ADX, which is going to be like 47 cents a share, I believe. But it's going to dip probably by the amount of the dividend. So I'm going to pick up 100 shares tomorrow of ADX. I'll show you a chart comparison compared to something like SPY, the S&P 500 ETF. You see the performance on this fund. It's stellar. It's been around for almost 100 years, I guess, in one way, form, or another. The other thing I plan to do, I'm going to sell out of HYT. I'm not going to wait for a bounce. It was up on Friday, I think, above my cost basis, which is at 886 per share. I'm gonna have additional shares because I exercised my rights offering, so I'm gonna have like 50 odd shares at a 10% discount to whatever the net asset value is at that time. And I really don't want the shares I have, which are about 500. Not a bad fund. It's okay. It's just that currently Bitcoin's selling off, right? It's dropping over the weekend. If that maintains to the down position, if Bitcoin remains low on Monday, I'm getting into blocks again. I picked up 10 shares last week on a dip on Bitcoin because basically Bitcoin and Ethereum are the two primary holdings of blocks, form of exchange traded funds that it holds. And I did so well on blocks before, both in the dividend money you received and when I finally sold it, I sold it above cost basis. Plus, I'd received dividends, so I made about $600 the last time I swung traded over the course of about a month or two. I think that I held it. So my plan is to get out HYT to help finance my purchase of both ADX and block shares, and so that's what I plan to do this week. Bitcoin's dropping over the weekend. Let's take a look what Bitcoin is doing currently. Weibo is pretty much up to date, at least on this phone. 86,000. You got a 2.66 percentage drop on Bitcoin. Ethereum is down too, and Ethereum's at a real interesting level. That's a big drop, and I had set alert up for it. Where that little orange line is, and you can see there's support right there too. So I'm interested in picking up blocks because blocks holds. It's a pretty heavy weighted fund it has within it that holds the Ethereum. It's like a spot price exchange traded fund that it holds. One of them, I forget which one, but so basically, blocks has a ton of exposure to Ethereum and Bitcoin and some of the things relative to the cryptocurrency, like some of the miners and shit. And plus, it pays a weekly dividend. I've done really well on it in the past. So I'm going to make it a swing trade with a potential hold for a certain amount of shares if I get them cheap enough. I'm not sure I'm going to sell out this time because I'm going to get a cheaper cost base than what I had before. So I think I'm just probably going to hold, see where blocks is currently. Anyway, so blocks is at 1911 on Friday. Okay, this is as of Friday. I expect that if Bitcoin remains deflated, in addition to Ethereum being down so much, I expect this to fall beneath $19 a share. And so it's already in that alert range that I set up previously. I kind of track Bitcoin and Ethereum and see what they're doing relative to the price action of blocks. And that's where I start to buy when I see like a big drop in a single day of either Ethereum or Bitcoin, or if I see my target, my real target on like Bitcoin is in the 70 range. To be perfectly honest, it doesn't mean we're going to get there, but so on that precipice, I just basically dollar cost average blocks. That's my proxy trade for both Bitcoin and Ethereum because it pays such a massive freaking dividend. And it does move relatively well if you get a pop in Bitcoin or Ethereum. This has popped pretty significantly at times, so I'm liking this fund a lot. I've made quite a bit of money already on it in a short period of time, and it's well underneath its 52-week high at 25.17, and that dividend yield is just like unbelievable on it. Now I know I don't believe in chasing yield, but I believe in trading when these things get deflated relative to their underlying price action. When you start seeing the price action of the underlying getting close to some supports that are fairly strong, that's a time when I want to have some exposure to something as a proxy. And so this is one of my main proxies for Bitcoin Ethereum trade. In addition, I also trade selling out of the money puts on CleanSpark and Mara. I've talked about that before. I recently took profit on all those contracts. In addition to some of the other stuff I was talking about, like in the NVIDIA trade I did, I took profit on that. I'm waiting to after earnings to see what happens with NVIDIA before I consider selling puts on NVIDIA, just from that NAV erosion that happens with it. I'm sure Blocks is going to erode and has eroded, and I actually capitalize on that relative to what I see on the charts for both Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I start picking up shares. So this is going to be a big trade for me here. I'm going to start getting into it heavily this week, in addition to selling out of HYT and buying. I'm going to pick up 100 shares of ADX. That's going to be my S&P 500 exposure. Speaking of which, I was going to pull up a comparison of what ADX is doing. This is ADX here. ADX has been around like 100 years, and this fund, just on the price action, is up 14,000% according to this. Right, for the year, it's only 5%. For the 5 year, it's 94%. If you want to run a comparison, you hit compare on this. Type in SPY. I use that as the comparison, the benchmark, basically. And you can see what it's done over time. And this is just on the max time frame. Let's go on the 10-year. And you'll see what's done on this is total return currently. So you can see that SPY, according to this, is beating it. Okay, I got the wrong fucking thing on her. Let's take that off. Let's put on. Sorry, I knew something was wrong. I was looking at, how the fuck is that? I was looking at PEO, which is another fund from Adams. That's an interesting fund too. But anyway, let's compare ADX to SPY, the benchmark. So the last 10 years, ADX has beaten SPY, which is one of the most popular S&P 500 funds. So keeping in mind, I'm using SPY as a benchmark for ADX currently to see how they've done on total return basis. And on a total return basis, ADX kicked its ass over the last 10 years. Max time frame, a little bit of different story, but not by much. SPY seems to win out on the max. Now let's go on the 5 year, and you see ADX is outperforming SPY on the 5 year. And this thing pays like an 8% dividend yield. Its distributions are quarterly. It used to pay a smaller amount every quarter, but what they're doing now is going to even out the amount. So the X date for ADX is this Monday. You would have had to got in by Friday in order to collect the dividend. The dividend amount, I think, was announced at 47 cents per share. It's a quarterly payment, and they're going to even it out now. They used to pay a big lump sum end of the year, but now they're just going to keep it consistent, close to around 8%. Their target is about 6 to 8%, depending on what market conditions are presenting them. But you get to see how those funds perform since inception, and you can see, let's see, the max in the 10-year and the 5 year. It's just an amazing fund how it's performed, and anything that's managed that well, even though this is a closed-end fund and not very liquid, you can't do options on it. You collect up to an 8% yield on this thing on a quarterly basis. You get paid distributions, and it's outperforming SPY, the S&P 500 benchmark, and it's outperforming it. So what's not to like? So that's going to be my go-to vehicle for growth, basically, is ADX. I never plan to sell it. I'm going to start. I had some shares and I sold out, and I kind of regret that now. I should have just held on. So I'm bullish on ADX long term, and that's going to be my long term play on the S&P 500 relative to the S&P 500, basically, because it only holds like 100 holdings as opposed to the S&P 500 is 500. But anyway, so that's what I'm doing going into the week. I also got some things I'm going to do with SGov, I believe, are set reminders. I want to rotate out of SGov rates might come down. We got a Fed meeting this week. I don't think they plan to lower rates this week, but with the turnover that's going to happen within the Fed makeup, with a new Fed chief coming sometime into the year, you're going to see rates dropping by some amount because Trump's bullish on putting his own people into place in the Fed and dropping interest rates. That's what the man wants. And if that happens, SGov is going to continuously go down as far as its yield. So I'm going to rotate in something that I can keep my reserve in. And the next thing I could think about is JAAA. And the reason I'm going to sell out of SGov because I'm way up on it right now because I'm playing the cycle between X dates. And so I decided before the next X dividend date, I'm going to sell out of it before JAA has its X dividend, or rather, before it has its X dividend date. I'm going to sell out of SGov this week before the X dividend date for SGov. Then after or by the X dividend date at JAA, when it goes down by the amount of dividend, I'm going to start loading up on shares at JAA, and that's where I keep cash. It's my rotation money. I'm paying attention to Apple this week, Microsoft, Meta earnings coming up on Wednesday, along with Tesla. I wish I had bought some Meta shares. I did buy some Apple shares, and also own some Netflix and Amazon shares. And so that's what I'm doing this coming week. Monday, I'm going to sell out of HYT, I believe, if I'm up on it, because I'm going to get some discounted shares anyway, so I'll get a better price on them. Also, I'm going to buy ADX shares, at least 100 shares. I'm going to buy more shares of blocks if it's down. Anyway, guys, that's what I'm doing. Not financial advice, but just how I'm playing the Bitcoin pullback over the weekend. I'm hoping that actually it pulls back further to my ultimate target of in the 70 range. 60 to 74,000. It looks like it could get there. It hasn't. It's been weeks. It's been trading in a channel. So I'm just going to dollar cost average shares of blocks and play that as a kind of swing trade. I plan to always hold some shares of it, but nothing over 100 shares at a time. But when I'm dollar cost averaging when on the pullbacks of Bitcoin and Ethereum, I don't care if I end up with 1,000 shares of it, to be perfectly honest. All right, guys, take care. Bye.